This is probably my most difficult tutorial by far. Hey, what's up guys, mine's Tsubasa, and welcome back to another RPG Maker MV tutorial. And today we got Special Performances Part 2 of Tokyo Mirage Sessions. You know why this is so difficult? One of the recordings that I have planned for this video actually has an entire outline to go with it, explaining what I had to say and in what order. That's how complicated those two skills are, and you'll see exactly what they are. Anyways, with that said, a few things I need to go over. One, just like last episode, there are states, well, at least two in this tutorial that I can't exactly demonstrate the effects without giving the enemies some attacks. And trust me, calculating how many turns will be till those enemies should attack may take too long. I'll explain what they are later. And the last thing is, I'm gonna be using one tips and tricks just like I did last episode, which I thought would be two tips and tricks, but it just ended up being one, and that's Thief's Revenge. You'll see how that plays out. Anyways, with that said, let's begin the tutorial. Alright, let's go over the plugins. We have 4 required plugins, plus one more for the sake of it being a base plugin. Three of those 4 required plugins are new, at least from the last tutorial, or from previous tutorials. One of them is the same, which is just auto passive states, which I use in a lot of tutorials nowadays. And then one optional plugin is base trip events, which I don't have here, but you'll see why it's optional. But I feel like if you were to implement that particular skill that correlates to that plugin, then yes, you should definitely use base trip events for that. We have target core, element core, critical control, and the required plugin for critical control, damage core. You'll see what these have. Well, you'll see what these plugins have to be used for later. And with that, we can start with the states. So it's time to talk about the states, and I should mention before we begin this recording, as you may notice or have noticed already, there are sections where I put notes, either in the form of just like basically this. I put notes in the note tag boxes, or if in certain events where I just leave comments. Yeah, it might be helpful for you to read some of them this time, because there will be things about certain skills that I forget to talk about, and some of them are actually quite important. Other than that though, you don't have to pay too much attention to the notes. Anyways, let's start with our special states, because there are no generic states like last time. So like the Confused, Charm, Stun, and Poison. Anyways, HP Regen is gonna be used after using the skill Aerial Dance. Can be used with a passive aura extension plugin. I forgot to mention that in the beginning of the video, but oh well. Or at least the last recording. It's gonna do it for 3 turns because we do not want to do it for 4 turns. Usually in these scenarios I would put it for 4 turns so that it lasts for 1 more turn of effects. This one's a different case because, well, we don't want to do it for 4 turns, as I said just earlier. It'll heal 15% of HP. This amount's debatable. I'm not even sure how much it is in the base game. Marking/cover is one of the 2 skills I won't be able to demonstrate in this particular tutorial. It's gonna last 2 turns because we want the effects to last more than the initial turn, or 1 more than initial turn, which originally is just 1, by the way, or at least as described. Target rate will be set to 1000 because this is a skill. The state simply drags the enemy's attack towards the user. However, a potential alternative is the Taunt plugin, and this will be used after using Axe Bomber. Counter is another skill that I won't be able to demonstrate. We'll set the counter rate to 100%. Will be used after using Mortal Curse. Set to 2 turns, just like Marking/cover. And counter control isn't used because it's not really required. It just depends on how you want the counter to be in your particular game. Nothing special here. We also have Ultimate Damage Target, which is just a check state. Its name doesn't really have to do much with anything. It's used after using Final Hour and Mass Destruction. It'll be used for the common event, so you'll see what happens. With that said, we're gonna go with the first set of skills, aka the most difficult skills in this particular tutorial, Empty Wave and Raging Blast. Oh boy. Alright, so we're gonna have a little section here just for Empty Wave and Raging Blast, because their states are extremely difficult to explain as well. Alright. Empty Wave and Raging Blast are actually 2 skills that lower the resistances of certain elements. Empty Wave being the physical element, which is just 1 element in this tutorial. Usually in the game it would be the sword, lance, axe, and bow elements, just like a Fire Emblem. And also Raging Blast would lower all resistances, including you know, like fire, thunder, the thunder elements. Anyways, for this tutorial, we're only going to be using the physical elements, which is again just one element in this tutorial, and the thunder elements, which we're going to explain using a generic thunder skill later on. There will be also the okay, I think we should explain the trait stuff first. Rates will be not applied to the traits of either the enemy or the states itself. Instead, they will be applied with auto passive states, but the point is we use the force element rates note tag from element core. That way, well, one of the features of the force element rates is that, well, for one, that forces an element rate. Second is states with a higher priority and the same effects or the same element that it affects. So if this particular state causes the rate to be 100% and this particular state has a rate that causes it to be 50%, then the rates with the 100% will override the other state because of the state priority. Due to the fact that the state priority is higher than this state priority, which is 19 as opposed to 0, this will take priority. I said priority way too many times in that sentence, or run-on sentence. Anyways, but yeah, these default states, both of them actually will be applied using auto passive states. Simple as that. Let's talk about the rankings actually. In Tokyo Mirage Sessions, the point of lowering weapon resistances is that there's actual ranking system for these resistances. The only one we're not including here as an example is repel, because repel is not something that could be easily worked around, especially in this case. The ranks being null, resist, neutral, weak. Null being 0 damage, resist being weakening damage, neutral being normal damage, and weak being additional damage. You know your typical element rates and effective rates. Anyways, ranks will decrease using the appropriate skill. We got that part, we got this part. Removal conditions will be remove a battle end and turn end at 2, just like the previous states, due to the fact that we want this effect to last the next turn, especially if it's only one character in battle, because, well, if you use Empty Wave, you'd never have a chance if the turn end, or if the turn duration was set just to 1. You never have a chance to take advantage of this effect. So there's that. Okay, I think we should talk about the actual rates we're going to be using for this tutorial. The physical rates, the default physical rates for all enemies will be resistance, so 50% less damage, and the default thunder rate will be neutral, so normal damage. We're going to have it so that the physical rate can be lowered twice, so neutral to weakness, and the thunder rate can be reduced one time, just as the ranking goes. However, if a rate is at weakness already and it gets lowered once more, nothing will happen, which we will explain a lot more later. So I guess we should talk about priority now. This one has, well, re-talk about priority. This one's 19 priority. The neutral rate has 19 priority, which is greater than the default rates of 0 priority, and the weakness has 40 priority, which is greater than neutral and the resist priority, meaning this state will be applied as opposed to these two, at least for the sake of these note tags. And the same basically applies for the thunder rates. And then take note of the icons because they'll be appearing depending on what the rate is. However, for some odd reason, the thunder rates state, or at least one of these states, don't actually appear in battle. I think it didn't work in testing, but we'll see what happens. Anyways, with that long explanation ahead of us, we're gonna go with the skills for now. Alright, it's time to talk about Empty Wave and Raging Blast. Alright, a few things we need to go over because I didn't actually discuss this. For my note tags for the element core, physical is element 1 and thunder is element 4, just for the sake of displaying it in the case of forcing element 1 and 4 respectively for each of those elements. And again, thunder is only used for this particular tutorial when all the elements should be affected. Anyways, if we go back to Empty Wave, I'll just explain this again here, which it'll lower physical resistance by 1 round, by 1 rank for 1 turn. I keep calling it round because the original game was round, and only physical resistance. And Raging Blast will reduce all resistances, in this case both physical and the thunder rates. by 1 rank as well. As ranks, and I explained the ranks earlier. And we're gonna have certain test skills that will be used in order to check how much these rates, or the fact that these rates will actually impact the rates at all, which are Bash, our basic attack, which will now have no variance and no critical hit rates, again, tough display. And we have a generic Thunder skill Zeo, which will have also 0 variance and no critical hit rates. Or no enabling of, I don't know how to say it, but anyways, if we go back to Empty Wave and Raging Blast, we have a few things to explain in the action sequence. So we have this sublime text here. Usually it would have been it's typically for me to explain just these 2 skills actually. However, if you want to read what's on here, go ahead, pause the video, take all the time you need. This will explain stuff that I don't really think I should explain in this video. Empty Wave will be targeting 1 enemy, as per usual, and we'll be using target action for the action sequence. We'll have our typical action sequence right here, but then we're going to have a few conditional branches. If target is affected with state 81, which is our weakness state, our physical weakness state, then nothing will happen because we do not want to reduce it any lower. If target is affected with state 80, which is our neutral state, we'll be adding state 81, again, the weakness state, and removing this state, so that we don't have, or at least, technically the weakness state would just simply override the neutral state. However, for the sake of being more organized to the player, it'd be a lot better if you could just remove the state instead. And also, if the state is default, which means if the state was if the state had a resistant physical rate, which is default for the enemies, we'll just be adding state 80 because we do not want this to be removed at all, like ever. This does override it, but this will also be state 79 doesn't have the icon to go with it, so it'll just stay hidden. Same thing applies for Raging Blast. It'll still have this physical conditional branch. However, we also have a Thunder conditional branch, which is smaller because, again, there's only 2 states for Thunder rate. And in this case, if the target is affected with state 84, which is the weakness rate, then nothing will happen. If they're affected with the default rate, which is neutral, we'll be adding state 84. Again, 83 will be hidden anyway, so it won't clutter up the enemy status. And with that said, we'll be going on to part 2 of the skills. Alright, so it's time to talk about the second half of the skills, starting with Aerial Dance, which deal heavy damage to all enemies. Heavy damage to all enemies, and the party will regenerate HP and... oh no, it's just HP. Each turn for 3 turns, again using the states we had before. The only thing special about this is the regen state can reapply to all targets or as an aura, and we'll be adding state 72 to all allies. Grand Finale will deal heavy damage to all enemies and heal 30% of HP and MP to all allies. Yes, I think I said that right. This is one of the skills of this tutorial that will be adjusted appropriately. In the original skill has damage boosted with the session accounts. However, in this case, it will be the user's level, as noted by here. But besides from that, the only thing special about it is using this specific action sequence note tag. HP plus 30% to all allies, and MP plus 30% to all allies. We'll be seeing another skill like this, or at least one that involves level soon enough. Full Throttle will deal heavy damage and have 100% critical. The original skill caused physical session skills to be critical hits. In this case, we're only making the skill itself have 100% critical, as known as by this note tag, using the Critical Control plugin. Wild Ecstasy will deal heavy damage to all enemies and increase damage based on missing HP, basically. Well, I think the original skill just says, well, it's basically the same thing. We'll just have this particular formula using magic attack times 3. However, in addition, the user's max HP will subtract the current HP to provide a damage bonus. And then we have some notes here demonstrating what will happen with different HP values or HP percentages. This one being 10% of HP and this one being 50% of HP. Aside from that, the action sequence is not that special. Deep Chill is a skill that's going to be using the tips and tricks for Deep's Revenge. Deep Chill will deal light damage 2 to 8 times one target, based on the agility. Agility in this case will be replacing skill, as stated right here. Formula, nothing special. Animation, not anything special. Let's see. There's several important stuff in this note box here. Hero's base agility is 75, and tutorial 75 agility equals 3 deep chill hits, because in this case, we'll be calculating every 25 agility. So if the user has 0 or the user has 80 agility, it'll still be 3 hits. However, the minimum amount of hits is 2, so if you have 0 of agility, which we'll be showing later, it'll still do 2 hits. By equipping a new weapon, Hero's agility will be 200, dealing 8 deep chill hits. I also added another weapon which will decrease the agility by 75, but will still do 2 hits anyways, as you'll see later. Instead of attacking random enemies, the skill will attack one enemy to keep things simple from the source TNT. This is true, by the way. The original game was actually 2 to 8 times to random targets. It was odd. The difference between this skill and TNT are that the skill will not heal the caster, because Thief's Revenge actually healed you based on how many hits you did, which furthermore was based on how much agility you had. The formula is agility divided by 25 instead of 34, and the minimum hits is 2, while the maximum is 8. As for the action sequence, it's not anything too special. It's the custom target evil. I'm not even sure how do you pronounce it actually. But I'm just going to talk. This is basically a copy and paste of the original script. Only differences being, as I stated earlier, will be divided by 25. We'll have a minimum of 2, a maximum of 8, and have no healing, which is basically everything after this. And finally, we have Freeze Over, which is the only skill that actually has a common event and a variable, which will deal heavy damage to all enemies, but will increase damage based on how many turns have passed. We'll be using variable 72, which we'll be seeing later, and the damage will increase using the troop event, which we'll be also showing later. Variance critical hits are set to 0% and no respectively, to easily display the change in damage, and nothing special with the action sequence. In fact, everything relies on the common event. No, actually, it's not the common event, it's just the troop event. Turn 0 we'll be setting this is wrong actually. This will be setting the variable 72 to 0 in order to reset every battle, as stated in this note right here. However, we're also going to be having this condition right here. The conditions are when turn 1 ends and every turn after that, which we set a turn. I'm not sure. I'm still not sure what this means too much. Anyways, the conditions set above will cause the variable to increase every turn starting from turn 2. The base troop events plugin, in this case, can be used as well, which is where it comes into play. And every turn it'll increase the power by 10, a solid 10 damage increase per turn. With that said, it's time to go over the third set of skills. The third set of skills are arguably easier than the last set, so let's get with it. Final Hour and Horror Hunter, or wait, no, wrong scale. Final Hour and Mass Destruction are extremely similar in that they will both do heavy damage, albeit to different targets. So one enemy for Final Hour and Mass Destruction will affect all enemies. The only difference being between the actual effects is Final Hour will have a chance to cause near fatal damage based on agility. However, Mass Destruction will have a chance to cause fatal damage based on agility. The difference being, fatal damage is basically their entire health bar. Final Hour is close to their entire health bar. In this case, we're going to be setting it to 85% their HP. Speaking of, let's go over the formula. If B is effective with state 77, which 77 is actually our check state, and also no critical hits because we'll explain that later actually. If B, or the target, is effective with state 77, then 85% of the max HP will be dealt damage. Basically the same for Mass Destruction, but it's the entire health bar. Otherwise, you'll just have your typical heavy damage formula as we've done with several skills before. Same thing with Mass Destruction, again, just what happens with the fatal damage. Both of these will have no critical hits, or will have critical hits set to no, for sake of otherwise this skill is able to actually instantly kill the targets, which is not exactly what you want to happen. Although this skill will actually have variance as opposed to this one because we didn't, or as opposed to Mass Destruction, because Mass Destruction is actually, well, it's more like Mass Destruction shouldn't be able to deal less than the target's max HP, which is why we don't have variance, which is explained right here. Aside from that, we have the common events, which is going to be the most difficult part here. After you're doing your specific action sequence, we'll be having target action for each of these enemies actually, because each of these it's actually going to be a random chance and it's going to be applied to each target individually. Common event 35 will be playing, and common event 35 is right here. We'll be controlling the user's agility stats using a variable to just control it. In this case, agility of Hero, because Hero is the only one who's using this particular skill, or these particular skills. We'll have a couple of notes here, but for this situation, basically, it's going to be a 1 through 100 value, or 1 through 100 random number. A random number between 1 and 100, instead of scaling with the actual agility, because you can't actually set a maximum value to equal a variable, as stated here, which I find quite unfortunate. And it's going back to the skill. If we check our action sequences, if variable 74, so our random number, is less than the user's agility, Herald's agility at least, we'll be adding state 77 to the target. Again, 77 is the check state, and if its check state is applied, the extreme damage will be taken into place. Then we'll be just having a simple action effect and removing state 77 from all the targets. Because even if they're not killed, we do not want them to have a chance, or we do not want them to always be killed using these, or using both of these skills. Anyways, let's finally get on with the last few skills. Axe Bomber is just heavy damage and covers other party members for 1 turn. In this case, it's just increasing the target rates. Only thing here is adding state 73 to the user after combat. Savage Cut will deal heavy damage and remove all enemies' buffs. I'm gonna have to find a way to display this, but it just removes all their buffs and deal heavy damage to every enemy. Nothing too special. Mortal Curse is basically Axe Bomber in this situation, but applying counter states instead, being state 76. And Karma Cut will, well, it's one of the skills where, the effects will apply to the skill itself and not the sessions, and the damage will increase using the level instead of the session count as well. So it'll increase with the user's level and have 100% accuracy instead of the session skills having 100% accuracy. Besides that, that'll be the end for all these skills. And it's finally time for the demonstration. Alright, it is time for the demonstration, and a few things. One, the enemies have the passive states for the default rates. I just didn't show it. That's all. Besides that, another skill I can't actually display is the skill that removes buffs, because there isn't actually an easy way to give buffs to enemies without giving them a skill. I also was planning to give them attack skills, but it just made the demonstration take extremely long. So we're not gonna do that. Instead, we're just gonna have 3 of the effects not be able to be shown, which honestly is a lot more than I was expecting for this tutorial. Anyways, we're gonna be actually showing off an odd skill for this beginning, because we want to see how much damage will rack up after all these turns have passed. Freeze Over, again, will increase damage based on the number of turns that passed. Its base damage will be 3. You'll be seeing how much that racks up over the turns, because it'll increase 10 per turn. Anyways, for the sake of these next skills, Empty Wave and Raging Blast, we're going to be showing off how much damage Zeo and the basic attack of Runefire will do. Zeo, 10 damage. Basic attack, we'll be doing 13 damage. We'll also be using a Clap Track here. and Raging Blast will be used, inflicting the states that appear. That will be reducing the rank so that physical damage will be at a neutral rate, and thunder damage will be at a weakness rate, which means Zia will be doing double damage, or 50% more damage to 15. And basic attacks and physical damage will be doing double damage because resistance is reducing it by 50%, and now it's just back up to 100%. Anyways, by using Empty Wave on his Tempest Fenrir, we'll be reducing the rank of the physical rate to weakness now, but the thunder rates also expired, so there's that. So we actually don't need to check with the wizard. However, we're just going to use a clap track. And Runefire will be just attacking to deal 39 damage, which is quite a lot. In this case, however, we're also going to be using the Potion of Death on Harold, which will deal damage to him. You'll see exactly why. Anyways, Harold will be using Aerial Dance, which will deal heavy damage to all enemies, and the party will regenerate HP for 3 turns. The animation was just to show it, but there's the HP regen. Alright, we're using the clap track now. And next skill will be Grand Finale, which will deal heavy damage to all enemies and heal 30% of the party's HP and MP and increase damage with the user's level. Which, I think it's 15, actually. And there it is. And there's the healing. And there's the regeneration. Wow, it just all flows so smoothly. And we're using clap track once more, because our next skill is Full Throttle, which will just have 100% critical. However, for the next skill, you'll see why we have the clap track used and the Potion of Death used. Actually, the Potion of Death has just basically lost its purpose now. We're gonna be damaging Harold, and Harold will be using Wild Ecstasy, which does 500 damage. However, we're gonna be using Potion of Death once more on Harold, and Runefire will just use Clap Track 3. So it actually does just half of his HP, but that's not really the point of Wild Ecstasy. We're gonna use Wild Ecstasy again, and it should increase damage by 250, which it does, because it's just adding the missing HP to the 3 damage that was base, or that was the base damage. I forgot what the next. Oh, it's Deep Chill. Oh boy. So we're gonna be changing Harold's equipment. Silver Sword Plus is actually gonna be his default weapon, which is just gonna set his agility back to normal. Exalted Falchion will increase it by 125, making it 200. You'll see its effects later. And Omega Sword, which is what he has now, makes his agility 1, which again we'll see later. Silver Sword Plus, since agility divided by 25 is how many hits Deep Chill does, again minimum 2, maximum 8, it'll be doing 3 hits. And now Harold's in first. Great. Alright. Harold's going to be equipping Exalted Falchion, which means Deep Chill should be attacking 8 times. I'm pretty sure that was 8. I didn't count them. I'm using the Clap Track just for the sake of it. And Harold will be equipping the last sword, which is the Omega Sword. Remember, the minimum is 2, which means that even if he has 0 agility, this will still do 2 damage, or 2 hits. With that said, it's time for Freeze Over. I don't know how many turns his turns have passed, but it should do an extremely large amount of damage now. And it passed by 13 turns. Alright, that's fine and dandy. Anyways, we're gonna be using Clap Track 3 here. And Harold will be using Final Hour, which will deal heavy damage and have a chance to cause near fatal damage based on agility. However, with the Omega Sword as is, we'll only be having a 1% chance. However, with the Exalted Falchion, our chances will be 200, meaning if we use Final Hour, it kills it because we've been doing damage to it this entire time. So we're going to be saving Mass Destruction for the end because that will end the battle. So we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to be using Axe Bomber, which will deal heavy damage and cover our party members for 1 turn. Again, one of the skills that we can't actually display, or won't be able to display. Savage Cut, we don't actually have to display, it'll just remove all enemies' buffs because, Yeah, we can't display it because I didn't program a way for the enemy to have buffs. So it's just a heavy damage skill, and doesn't really need explaining. Mortal Curse will do heavy damage and apply a counter yourself for 1 turn. And again, we can't show that either. Welp. Can use Clutch at 3 again. Here we'll be using Karma Cuts, which will just have 100% accuracy. I think it was in a note tag box, but I forgot to explain it, but all the skills have 100% accuracy, just that in a normal setting it would have 100% accuracy. If it were just like this tutorial, at least. And the final thing, which is, well, Mass Destruction, is gonna end the battle, because it's gonna kill every enemy. Yeah. That's the end of the demonstration, and I'm gonna talk about more about this at the end. See you there. Alright, that's the tutorial, and as you can tell, it was a mess. It's probably, the tutorial is gonna probably be at least 30 minutes of just the total amount of footage I have. And I probably will reduce it down to like 28 or 29. It might not even reduce at all. Like, seriously, this is the longest tutorial I've had. But yeah, I apologize for the mess of the skills, because again, 3 of them I can't actually show the effects for because the enemies would have to have an attack skill, which would just prolong the demonstration even more, or a buffing skill, which would also prolong the demonstration more. But there's no event command to give them a buff during battle. I don't think. I'm pretty sure. Anyways, with that said, if you liked the video, please consider dual-slashing this like button, that like button, or sending a blaze to the subscribe button. And with that, I say, see you guys, and stay safe.